we like to focus on ideas rather than people. I think that's that Eleanor Roosevelt quote, like small minds focus on people, and then medium minds, I can't remember, it was events, and big thinkers are people that talk about ideas. Yeah. And so people with the interview, such as yourself, we just want to talk about, things that we care about and things that you care about and you think are important.
Sure. No?
Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Have we roll the dice?
Cool. Should we bring this mic closer towards you? You can have it like underneath you, but it sort of has a cone kind of pickup.
Kind of that way? Is that going to be...
Yeah, that should be good.
Yeah, I'll check
see there.
it's picking up.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. You can lead us forward, and I'll think with this, and here we go.
All right. Hello, and welcome. This is Dre.
This is John.
And we are Voices in the Dark. And joining us today is Peter Sage, the enlightened entrepreneur, and a good friend of mine since we met through London Real a few years ago.
That's right.
Welcome, Peter.
Pleasure to be here. Glad we could make it happen, guys.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure for us to be here. We are in your home in Leicester. I've never been to Leicester before. We briefly passed by it. It looked like a lovely town. And is this where you're originally from?
Yes, I'm a homegrown Leicester boy, born and bred. I've lived outside of the UK for many years, and I come back at a time where the city's become a lot more famous in terms of football. So,
what a story.
A good time.
It's a good time to come back. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what brought you back to Leicester? What made you decide to not just come back to England in general, but specifically to your hometown?
Well, I've travelled the world for many, many years, and sometimes you get into a place or into a home, for example, and there's nothing wrong with the home, but it's time to move home. And I'd been in Dubai for the last 6+ years, wow. And that was, I guess, time to move home. Yeah. My lady, she was missing her family in Nottingham. She's a Nottingham girl, just up the road. So I said, let's come back for a year and see how we get on, and then probably look around again. I mean, luckily today it's a sunny day, but that's not typically the norm throughout 365 days of English weather, and I'm a bit of a sunshine guy, so We'll see how long it lasts.
How did you find Dubai? Like, is that a good place? Did you enjoy living there?
I did. I really enjoyed Dubai. I mean, again, weather is great. It's a little hot 2-3 months of the year, but you can put up with that. It's better than being freezing and grey for most of it. Tax-wise, as an entrepreneur, it's always very advantageous. The proximity to global destinations as an international hub was phenomenal. I live on an aeroplane. I fly more than a pilot, so that was always great. Emirates, fantastic airline.
It is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good things going for it. But it's nice to always remember your roots. Whether you get up, whether you get down, always remember where you came from, because that gives you a sense of grounding. And I like my hometown, and I like my place here. It's out in the countryside, as you can probably see. Yeah. And a nice energy to it. So I'm happy to come back and chill out for a little while.
Definitely. So both me and John have lived in a lot of different places around the world throughout our lives, and we do have that sort of problem of being a little bit rootless. I don't think either of us feels at home at our original kind of place. I'm Italian. I lived my sort of first 10, 12 years in Milan, but that doesn't feel like home. Yeah. New Zealand, where I lived most of the rest of that, actually now it's kind of evenly split with London as well. But there's no particular place where I feel quite at home. And you're right, it's a little bit, you miss that grounding, I think. How did you manage to hold on to Leicester as kind of your roots, even though you traveled so much and you spent so much time elsewhere?
I think because I was so sort of based here, and I was born here, I grew up here, and I lived here until my sort of late 20s. Okay. So there's a strong, sort of a deep sense of roots there. I don't have any ties back to my hometown now. I don't have any family here as such, so it was quite easy to let go and move around. And I've seen too much of the world to settle for Leicester. However, in terms of coming back, I feel that most boundaries these days, which are all limitations of perception, are always expanding. They say the universe is constantly expanding. I mean, a great question would be, what is it expanding into? If that's all there is, then what's past that? There's got to be something more which we're unaware of. But if we're expanding as people in a time in history where consciousness is without doubt inexorably rising, then where are our boundaries? And I feel far more of a global citizen right now than I do a hometown boy. What makes you you and what makes me me, irrespective of our birthplace, is really the essence of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And so, go live in New Zealand, go live, abroad, go live in Vancouver, go live, people are made of the same stuff. You have different cultural influences and different beliefs that are socially conditioned through birth, but we're all getting old enough to make our own distinctions now. And I know what makes you happy when you smile, because I know what makes me happy when I smile. I know how you feel when you feel sad, because I know how I feel when I feel sad. We're made of the same stuff. And I see a real emerging of awareness these days, whereby I feel far more a global citizen than I do divisive and divide and conquer and set up separatism and positionality around proving that my side of the table is better than your side of the table.
This is not how entrepreneurs usually speak. So this is why you're, I guess, the enlightened entrepreneur. So what can you explain to us? We could reel things out, like the number of businesses you've started, books you've written, you even recorded songs, you've done tons of different things. But what's really driving you to pursue your projects? Is there a unifying theme, or have you been kind of changing course as you discover what works for you and what doesn't?
Great question. I think that the natural innate answer is that one would strive to be in one's truth at whatever stage in one's life that is. Mm-hmm. My truth in my 20s was to try to be significance driven, have an ego, buy Ferraris and accumulate, because I was trying to prove to the world I was good enough, and I had a set of rules that I'd made up that says this is what has to happen in order to feel that I think people see me as good enough. Which is never the reality, it's always your perception, but it's real for those that perceive it. My truth right now is to really share a message and essentially try to transform an industry that I think is fundamentally broken. And that is an industry I've been a part of for nearly 3 decades, and that is the personal growth industry. And I see that industry that has so much potential to really help change people's lives, and it does. But I see it's being bastardized so commonly by people that, whether they intend or whether they don't is a different moral question, but go out with a message of, I have the answer, and if you pay me money, I'll give you the answer, and therefore, if you don't make that answer work for you, it's your fault, not mine. And there's no empathy to their real issues, there's no follow-through, there's no association to how do I sincerely, genuinely, and authentically help these people, to the point where if I don't feel it is your truth to have this particular product, I'm not going to sell it to you.
Yeah.
No. I want to see what my conversion stats are. I want to see what my back end is like. I want to see. That's the focus. It's all profit driven. And as you say, most entrepreneurs are focused that way, as I was in my 20s. And the tipping transition point, I believe, and I was very fortunate enough to have come through this or part of it, and we're all on our own journey still, is the point where you go from being driven primarily from egocentrism. How can I get? What's in it for me? How do I accumulate? And the more you accumulate, the more energy you have to invest in defending that or losing it. Versus how can I contribute? How can I add value? How can I go and leave a thumbprint on the world in a way that makes it a little bit better off just because I was fortunate enough to be here? And if you really want to boil it down, I really have a philosophy that chunks life down into a binary equation. The only reason people are listening and watching this right now is because we understand what binary means in terms of the digital age. But there is a superset, I believe, that really acts in the same way when it comes to humans. Why are we here? That's the age-old question that nobody wants to look at or answer. And you either have a philosophy around it that works for you, or you run around ignoring it as best you can. And I still believe that it is a binary equation of life is, call it the ones and zeros, is love or fear. And whenever you go to respond to something, you have a choice. You have a corridor you can walk down. You can either start off in a corridor of fear, which is always based upon self-serving, ego-driven, or you can start off in a corridor of love. Now, it doesn't have to be a giant jump down where you go at the master teacher level, someone like, guy that was quoted in the Bible, Jesus, I think his name was, who says, if you get slapped, you turn the other cheek. So if you're coming from fear, you think that's capitulation. You think that's surrender. You think that's being less than, giving up to something that's more controlling. If you're coming from, that's the corridor of fear. And 10 steps down the corridor of love, that's a strength beyond a strength. You see compassion in somebody. You don't judge them for it. Now, it doesn't have to be that far down. It could be as much as somebody cuts you up in traffic, you put your toe in the corridor of fear and you give them a scorn, or you think, what are they doing on the road? They're going to make me late. Has to be fear-based because it's egocentric. Or it could be like, wow, they must be busy. Let's give them the road. They probably had a bad day. Yeah. It's only dipping your toe in. But whatever corridor you start off in is the direction of travel.
It can be so difficult, kind of, even on that level. I was listening to Joe Rogan just the other day, and he described he'd been in like a car crash. A guy had crashed into him, and the guy comes over. Joe's kind of like, whoa, what just happened? And the first thing he said to the guy as he came over to him, Joe said was, are you okay? Whereas most people would be losing their mind, like, you just caused an accident, I'm so scared right now. And like you said, that's from fear. Whereas he was immediately compassionate, and that just really hit home with me. It came to mind from what you were saying there.
And I think the real reason we're here, and again, this is probably jumping forward a few levels in philosophy here, a little early in the interview, but if you really want to chunk it down, why are we in this human experience? If you can't make sense of that, then, as I say, you've got an issue. And I'm not here to impose my answer on anyone. I'm only here to offer what I found works for me. And that is that we're obviously here in some form of temporary existence that comes from a place that has to be more permanent. That the nature of everything being physical means its destination is non-physical. Therefore, the real essence of permeability and permeability of life has to be non-physical. So while we're physical in this reality, we have to have come from somewhere, and we're obviously going to go to somewhere after we've had this game. So why are we here? What's this little piece in the middle called physicality? Why are we here? And I personally, for me, believe it is so that we can learn how to respond more with love rather than fear in ever more escalatingly challenging circumstances. And that's the demand to grow up. That's why we're here. We don't get to choose that physically. And biologically, that's already done. We signed up for that, and we didn't get to choose once we were born whether that's going to change or not, no matter what the cosmetic cream companies are going to try and tell you. But to grow up emotionally, to grow up spiritually, that is a choice. And that's a choice I think we're here. Nobody wants to die at the end of this game of life, 80 years old, with the same mindset they had when they were 15. That just doesn't make sense to me. So yes, is it a progression? Of course it is. You don't want to rush there, I want to be enlightened. You don't want to be a 5-year-old saying, why aren't I 80 yet? That's not the point.
No.
It's progressive understanding. And as you go further down those corridors, or further up the escalating challenges of which corridor to pick. Someone hit you in the car. Okay, it's nobody woke up that morning wanting to have a car accident with you. You get that. But somebody goes and abuses your spouse. Now let's talk. Because you're going to progress to the next level of awareness once you've qualified the one beneath. And then you're going to be like Gandhi, you're going to be like Jesus, or you're going to be like most people and want to kill the son of a bitch. That's the level of how to grow up, and that's why I believe we're here ultimately as part of this journey.
I like that, and I think it fits with some of my own philosophies. I kind of see the universe as sort of a computational device that is computing every possible state of being and existence in every experience, and we're just one set of calculations going through that. And if we can sort of internalize that philosophy that you're talking about and strive to leave things a little bit more, people say better. I prefer to say more complex. If you look at from the beginning of the universe till now, there's been an increasing complexity in molecules and forms of life and everything. And I think we're just part of that trend, and it is our job as individuals to try to sort of push it a little bit further.
100%. And again, it's a beautiful overarching viewpoint, because if you go through the Darwinian theory of evolution, which you can't argue with some of the actual historical records. Now, the reason why it's evolving is up for debate. How did the first cell evolve? They can't, what happened before that? It's silent. This is not a mechanistic, chance probability universe. We're here for a purpose. Everything in nature has a purpose. That's obvious. But if you look and follow evolution, it is continually lowering entropy. It's continually raising complexity. And as you do that, if you take that on a sort of scale, very easy model of people, Yeah, you build the world, build a wall around it in half, and on one half you put people that come from the corridor of fear. What's going to happen? You run the simulation for 20 years. Well, now it's about how do I get stuff? How do I keep that stuff? How do I get more stuff? How do I protect the stuff that I've got? How do I, form groups or communities so that protection is in numbers? And we call those nations. At some point, you're going to define boundaries and have a us versus them stance, because it's all fear-based.
Yeah.
There's no cooperation. As you go to the other side of the wall and people come from love instead of fear, and you run that simulation 20 years, what have you got? I discover something and I think it's going to benefit everybody. I invite everybody to participate. Yeah, so you're able to work together. There's collaboration. You're not investing energy in attack and defense. You're investing energy into growth and contribution. And so you run that 20 years, you've got a more evolved sense of organism, society, growth. And that follows Darwinian theory quite well. So love is the driving character of evolution. It's the reason why we should be here, to evolve. And if you understand that it's a choice, we look around the world right now, because in the other sim, you've got probably 95% of the world fighting over 5% of the resources that are owned and controlled. And you form power centers and alliances, and there's hidden agendas. We call that politics. And what have you got? We obviously look around and see the world that is ran currently on a fear-based mentality, fear-based corridor. I think the job of people like yourself is to really bring awareness out that there is an alternative. And how do you know it works? Go to nature. Growth and contribution are the primary driving forces, and the membrane in between the two is cooperation. Now, when we wake up to that, we'll probably have graduated to the next level of complexity, and then someone's going to hit my brand new car instead of my old car, and then see how it
and then. What's interesting about that fear and the things you were just describing is that it's strange that we live in, say, in the Western world, in a significant amount of material abundance, and yet there's so much fear. Whereas, been reading several things recently about how people react when something terrible has happened, like a natural disaster, or even if it's just like not so huge, but like the power is out for a whole village and so on. And what happens? Well, according to all the zombie movies and disaster movies, everybody turns on everybody else, and suddenly it's just constant looting and rape and pillage. But that's not what happens. What actually happens is everybody helps each other. Exceptions are the people who try and steal things or take advantage. But the great majority of people actually just try and help each other out and take on roles that are helpful to the wider community. And I think there's some sort of strange disconnect in our minds where we think, but shouldn't they be afraid in those times? Well, maybe we become more afraid when we have less clearly defined purposes and roles, whereas in those desperate circumstances, you really see that you can do this and it has a positive effect. Whereas in this complicated version of reality that we're in, I don't know.
We've just seen the anniversary, 15th year anniversary of September 11, and that was definitely a time where the whole of New York came together, and they just helped each other out. Everybody was kind of working together to make sure that people would be saved, that there was water, clearing the rubble. And it's interesting to me because I think a disaster of that magnitude, or the earthquake recently in Italy, there's a suspension of the social contract that we've sort of pushed down people's throat. There's a suspension of you need to have a job, you need to prove yourself, you need, like all of that kind of gets removed temporarily. And in the absence of that, love comes to the surface. Something I've hit upon for myself is that whenever I'm worried about I need to do a good job because otherwise I'll be fired, or like I need to prove myself or I won't have that promotion and my dreams won't come through, that anxiety of there's a requirement on me to keep moving or else everything's going to fall apart puts me in a fear-based mentality. Whenever I've managed to not need to have a job, either because I was in between them or when you're taken care of by your parents or anything, your mind's much more open to possibilities, collaboration, and love.
100%. And I think you touched on it really well there, because when you said there's the suspension of the social contract because you've got the absence of the socially conditioned norms. People sometimes confuse love and fear as being the opposite of each other, and they're not. Fear is not the opposite of love. There's a subtle distinction here that most people miss. Fear is the absence of love. You see, it's like saying light and dark are opposites. Well, they're not. You can't turn on the dark. Mm-hmm. Let's go flick a switch and make it dark. No. Darkness is simply the absence of light. All the darkness on the planet can't put out one candle. So if you understand that, whenever we are focused on ourselves from a fear-based mentality, love is not present. You bring love in and that fear disappears. Just like switching on a light, the darkness disappears. Trying to fight fear or combat fear is very different. You're going to run a losing race, because you're now trying to use the same energy to get rid of the same energy, and that's not going to work. So understanding that when in times where the lights go out in the village, the times where there's an earthquake or what have you, we are kicked out of our own selfish paradigm and focused on one of the greatest levels of awareness and contribution and humanity that we can be put in with, which is empathy. Oh, wow. Again, go back to 9/11. The people that were at the higher level of consciousness, the first thought was, my God, what about those poor people in buildings? Is there anything we can do? Can we give blood? Contribution. Those that are lower levels of consciousness, how dare they attack the United States? Let's go declare war. And it's all a viewpoint based upon your level of awareness, your level of consciousness. And so when we are sometimes slapped around the face by whatever's running the program here in life to get out of ourselves, we automatically get drawn to that. How can I help? Oh my God, there's the lights are out in the village. How do we help people? I was in London a few years ago at the Park Lane Hilton, and they had a fire, and we all got evacuated, and we got put up in a ballroom of the Intercontinental next door, and it's 2:00 in the morning. You've got families, fairly wealthy families staying at this hotel that have got kids in their arms sitting on a ballroom floor with blankets with 100 other people, and I'm going up saying, hey guys, we have anything I can do to help get us up to other hotels here. But you should have seen how everybody was helping everybody. The mum with the kid that was crying, somebody would go and get them some milk. Somebody who was shivering, someone would get them a blanket. And these are people that 2 hours before were checking their brokerage accounts online on the 20th floor of the Park Lane Hilton. So it is. What's the natural state? The natural state is to grow and contribute through cooperation. And it sometimes takes a paradigm shift of getting out of our own way and our own social conditioning to really re-relate to that.
But not be scared of each other.
Sorry?
Not be scared of each other as well. I was thinking from that kind of scenario, you made me think of, I spent a lot of time in Russia, and when I was there, I was teaching English to Russian kids, and it was so much more natural, but at first difficult and strange to me, that the kids would come up and they want to hug, and you play with the kids, you like doing physical things like physical games, crawling, they crawl under your legs, you hoist them up, you run around, all this stuff. And I was just thinking, if I was doing this in the UK, I probably would have been arrested by now, because everyone would assume negative intent from me. And it just really struck me that, wait a minute, why is everyone so afraid? Yes, there are bad people in the world, and there always have been, but how toxic it is to be constantly looking around, expecting the worst from the people around you.
It's like trying to confiscate everybody's liquids on the airport security because one person decided to try to create a bomb.
Yeah.
It's, give me a break. And if you understand that the first real assessment to make is, where is somebody on their level of awareness, or consciousness, depending on what label you want to put on it. Where are they? Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because you can tell far more about somebody who is predominantly ethnocentric versus egocentric than finding out a 2-hour conversation with them about their life. It's easy. You go out with somebody for a meal and find out how they treat the people that serve them. And that'll tell you more about them than the business deal that they're trying to sell you on. It's easy once you start to know what to look for. But who are they at their core? Are they generally a giving person, ethnocentric, or are they a taking person, egocentric? And it doesn't mean they're bad people. They're just going through their own stage of evolution. I was massively egocentric at one point, and I tripped over myself enough, and I learned my lessons. Hopefully, still learning. I still get reminded once in a while. And you've got an inbuilt guidance system. Life will give you feedback. Life operates on very clear-cut principles. The first principle is what I call the presentation principle. And this was shared with me by a very good friend of mine, Rory Kilmartin, who really is an expert in relationships. And this doesn't just apply to relationships, it applies to life. And the presentation principle is that depending on your intention. You could intend to win a gold medal at the Olympics. You could intend to start a business. You can intend to start a family. Everything inconsistent with who needs to show up, with that identity or that goal, will present itself. If you haven't got good discipline on eating habits and you want to win a gold medal, it's going to show up. And you will have a certain type of event that you will attract, circumstance, what have you, that is designed to offer you the choice of whether to grow up or not. Love or fear, which corridor do you want to walk in?
Yeah.
If you choose fear, then you may get a slightly bigger, what's called the escalating feedback principle. And I call it the rumble strip. You're going down the highway of life and you think you're on track, but there's a rumble strip either side that's put there for your safety so that you don't veer into the central reservation or off the edge. And if you do start, you're listening to your music, everything's cool, you lose focus, whatever, and all of a sudden, brrr, driving down, what do most people do? They turn their music up because it's interfering with the noise of their enjoyment of the music. Oh, I'm fine eating McDonald's. Something, you've just got a mini stroke. It was a warning. Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Let me just turn the volume up and go have another cheeseburger. It's,
drowning out the feedback.
Escalating feedback principle, and next time it's not going to be a mini stroke. It's like, I just like going out for a drink and it is what it is, and you turn up late for work with a hangover. Well, escalating feedback principle, you're going to get 2 warnings, then you're fired. Yeah. You either listen or you don't, at various different levels. So, if you can do that, if you can start listening to the signs, life will give you the feedback. You don't have to guess at this game. It's all around. It's called life.
I totally agree. And something I've really felt that in recently has been trying to recover some of my own physical injuries, trying to sort of get back to being in shape so then I'd like to get fit like I was 10 years ago, but first I need to sort of get back to being normal. And something that I've recently began to feel with some of my own meditational practices and some experiences I've had is I hear the feedback that I wasn't hearing before. By working so hard, 12, 16-hour days, trying to make it, trying to be an entrepreneur, by, loading so much stuff on my back, I turned off those messages. And I didn't realize just how much in pain I was. I thought I was pretty bad, but I didn't think I was, complete wreck. But the moment I started meditating, the pain actually went up because I felt it. And I was, like you said, turning up the volume not to hear it.
Yeah.
And it was a major shift for me to kind of embrace it and sort of use it as a point of reference rather than something I was running away from.
Well done.
Yeah, so I definitely feel that.
One of the first things I tell people if they have a disease or some sort of health issue, as I said, what would have to happen for you to make it your friend? Because so many people are fighting their disease. I've got cancer, I'm going in for chemotherapy, we're going to beat this thing together and let's fight cancer or let's do all this. And I'm like, it's a rumble strip. It's there for a reason. Have you ever sat down and asked it what feedback it's there to give you? Because if you can internalize that and you can release whatever it is that it's giving you, that on all the studies is the common denominator in spontaneous remission. And it's not, I took these drugs. It's not, I used crystals. It's not, I meditated. It's not, I did these chants or went to this, happy dance. No. They can all be vehicles in order for you to get to a place of awareness where you finally let go and you surrender to something that's trying to knock on the door. It's like truth. You're looking for truth and it knocks on the door and you say, go away, I'm too busy looking for truth. And it goes away.
I think we find a lot of people even in the podcast community, you find people that are looking for the truth and they just keep looking for it. And they'll go and have 100 ayahuasca experiences or, meditate for years and then end up deciding to go and live alone for 6 months or something. And they're still looking. They keep looking because they don't realize they keep finding it. But like you said, they're ignoring it because they're waiting for some sort of clear super epiphany rather than that subtle feedback.
Their rules for having a breakthrough as to what truth means to them is usually the very thing that's stopping them from experiencing the fact that they have it. Because it has to be some lightning bolt through the sky, aha, eureka, jump out of the bath, clear, John Travolta in Phenomenon kind of moment. And it isn't. The challenge with seeking truth is the presupposition is already false. The presupposition is you don't have it. And every spiritual teacher has always said, where is the kingdom of heaven? Is it out there, over there, up there, or where is it? No, it's within. So when you start to let go of the need to find truth, you can allow it to present itself. And I remember when I spent many years working with alongside Tony Robbins, and I was a trainer for Tony for probably a decade and a half. And being a trainer was a big thing. There's less than 100 in the world after 30 years of him doing what he does. There's no exam to pass. It's a very unique position to be in. You can't buy your way in. You can't pass an exam. The master trainers just know when you're ready. And because it's so nebulous, we've had people that are part of the leadership team, which is like an apprentice track for trainers. They've been on leadership for 10 years, trying to be a trainer, and still never be one. And for me, the defining characteristic, and this is such a lesson for people in life, let alone just in my example, is that I remember when I was trying to be a trainer and I was doing all the right things. I was learning all the skills. I was showing up at the events. I was volunteering. I was putting myself out. I was working 16 hours, 20 hours a day, doing everything right that I thought a trainer should be. Just like many people that want to be rich, try to do all the things that they think would make me rich. And I was never promoted. And I remember one time I just said, to hell with this. I don't need a jacket. A jacket is the symbol for the trainer. You get presented with your jacket. I don't need a jacket to tell me who I am. That's it. Screw this. And I remember I just went out and did what I did. Next event, I got promoted. and the realization for me was this. I didn't become a trainer by getting a jacket. They gave me the jacket when they knew I was a trainer. So you don't become rich by getting money in the bank. You get money in the bank when you know you're rich.
Yeah.
That's and so many people looking for truth are running around with a flashlight in a dark room searching for the light, pointing everywhere. Where's the light? Let me light. Come on, show me the light. Someone show me the light. Where is it? I need to find this. Right? Never understanding that it's there all along.
Was there a turning point for you? Was there a rumble strip that really made you turn the music down and focus?
Several. I'm a slow learner.
Mm-hmm.
Slow learning group. Yes, I several things. One is I had a car accident when I was coming back from the office one time, 2:00 in the morning, having worked 133 hours that week. Fell asleep, hit an intersection at 60 miles an hour, which was not fun. That was a big wake-up call, and it taught me about, whoa, hang on, what track am I actually on? I'm building a monster that's trapping me. For what? So that I can appear to be good enough? I already had a lifestyle at 25 years old that most people would, think I'd have made it. If I'd have told my 16-year-old self, dropping out of school, that by 25 I'd be buying Ferraris for cash, flying Concorde and traveling the world, I think, wow, lottery winning kind of deal. And where was I? I was buying Ferraris for cash, flying Concorde, traveling the world, miserable as hell because I still needed the next Ferrari and the next Concorde trip in order to validate myself. Right? So that was a big wake-up call. Another big wake-up call for me was one time where it was actually at a Tony event when I didn't get promoted to trainer, and I thought I deserved it. And one of the master trainers pulled me aside, an amazing woman, has been a real mentor to me, called Debbie Battersby. I mean, she's just a incredible grandmother kind of figure that you'd always want, but very smart. And she pulled me aside and asked some questions, and I realized that it wasn't significance that I was battling with. I thought that was my nemesis, the ego, trying to control my ego. I know I should go in the love corridor, so I begrudgingly put my toe in and think that's valid, It wasn't. It was approval. Approval was really what I was seeking. Please, somebody, for the love of God, tell me I'm good enough. Not so I could show off, so I could actually feel as if I'm worth something. Because without that, I wasn't getting it. And when I saw that, I had this very, shifting epiphany. I looked back at every memory that I'd ever had in my life, and I realized something for the first time. I was not looking through my memories through my own eyes. I was looking at me in the scene, in what had happened. Now, that couldn't be a visual reference because I don't have a visual reference for that. It was a construct.
Yeah.
My entire history was a construct based upon how I thought automatically people would see me. And when I realized that not even my memories were real, I thought, whoa, something's got to shift. And that was a starting point for me really letting go of this good opinion of others. I was 27. And really starting to embrace the fact that growth and contribution is far more of a place that I want to hang out and live than worrying about whether people like me or not. Yeah, that's the number one skill I'd recommend anybody watching or listening here is, that you first want to master in life, especially as you get into late teens, early 20s. What's the primary skill you want to master? It isn't learning how to touch type. It's not learning social media. It's being okay with not being liked. Not from a place of not giving a crap, so therefore screw you. That's the flip side of the coin of insecurity. That's arrogance.
Yeah.
But just understanding that everybody's going to have their own issues, and if you don't fit their pictures, it's not a projection of your insecurities, it's a reflection of theirs. So have some compassion for that, and don't try to be this chameleon to fit yourself into a certain colour pattern that you think will now match them so that you can get approval, which is what I spent most of my life doing.
That resonates a lot with me, as regular listeners will be aware. That's really interesting that you saw it from the outside perspective. I've only experienced that with using psychedelics in a therapeutic setting, where it is strange how it just will confront you with, okay, so what does this look like to you as a more neutral observer? Or, okay, let's look, here's a younger version of you. Why would anyone treat this young boy badly? And I'm like, I don't know. Well, you do. I'm like, which was for me, that was, it's funny when we look, and I even asked you for turning points, and I guess they're never really that clear. I know it sort of is, but it doesn't mean that my whole life is suddenly perfect or better, or that I'm not still working very hard for it. But did that sort of image just sort of come to you in a moment, or?
You've got to be searching. Mm-hmm. I was desperate. I was open for a start. I thought I wanted to be a trainer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was trying hard to be one, which obviously the presupposition is you're not one already, so therefore you could never be promoted. Right? And then I started inquiring, and I'm like, but I'm trying to deal with this whole ego thing, this whole significance thing, and when I saw it was approval, it just literally just smacked me, and I'm like, wow. And then I made the connection to all the memories I'd had. It was like looking how from some other people saw me. Mm-hmm. And it was this sort of cascading chain of awareness that sort of grew, and then once I got my hooks in, I started looking further, and for the first time in that respect, not being afraid of the answers. I was past judging myself on my own answers, because sometimes we're so afraid to tell the truth that we think even if we admit it to ourselves, somebody here heard it. Yeah, and so we deny ourselves the ability to invalidate our own beliefs, which again is a trap. If people understood that, again, that journey through life from the mind of the 15-year-old to the mind of the 80-year-old, you're going to go through the same patterns, which is, I have a belief. A belief is nothing more than a feeling of certainty about something. That's all it is. And I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to be challenged on that, and I'm going to then defend and attack it. At some point, I'm going to be faced with so much information, I'm going to let go of it and adopt a new belief and realize the previous belief was false. And then I'm going to go through the same thing until the next time, and I let go of that belief and believe it was false.
Yeah.
And so the more wedded you are, the more fixed you are to how you think the world is, just like we were when we were 16 and left school and we knew everything about how the world was.
That was so good.
We got this thing down, right? And then at 25, we look back at the 16-year-old version of us and thought, dipstick. What an idiot. And then the 40-year-old version of us, if we're there yet, looks back at the 25-year-old and thinks, you knew nothing. And the 60-year-old version, it goes on,
Yeah.
So it's that level of being okay with living in the space of a question. We don't have the answers. So stop beating yourself up. Stop worrying about what other people think. Start caring about what their insecurities rather than worrying about what you think they think of yours. And life tends to flow a little better.
I think it's funny that in this day and age we still do that, because we have such good access to books, movies, and everything about historical context. And we know that no one in history, up until us, has gotten it right. So to think that we got it right seems a little bit arrogant when, 100,000 generations so far still get proven wrong every 20, 30 years. Every time.
Yeah, and the biggest lesson of history, in my view, is that we never learn the lessons of history.
Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, except that we do anyway, which is unfortunate. I think part of what we're talking about is the attraction that we have, or I certainly have, towards people who seem to be certain. And I don't mean like people who are like zealots, fanatics, but people who really seem to have got themselves sorted. And I find this in like romantic relationships, and then I always find out later that wasn't the case. They've just got better at having to handle. They've usually come from a home where like there's been a split and they've had to look after themselves a lot, and so they've created this kind of outward appearance of sturdiness, of not needing to show vulnerability or not being able to show it. And so when I know that you have worked with Dan Pena, a personality like his, which is very certain, very clear, can be very attractive, and I find that also appealing. I don't think that I would. I think now I realise that I wouldn't get a lot out of a relationship with Dan Pena, but that still appeals, that kind of certainty.
Of course. And that's what most people are craving, because they don't have the ability to be very certain that they can handle uncertainty. And uncertainty is the driving principle of life. As you said earlier, we live in a universe that is driven by statistical probability. When you cut down to quantum physics, where can the electron appear? Anywhere in a field of possibility. It is statistical probability influenced by intention and thought that will create that. But does it happen every time? No, of course not. So therefore you have to live with a level of uncertainty. It's inherent in the game. So if somebody has certainty and we haven't figured out how to live without that, and we're craving it, then you'll be drawn to it. And that could be in an unfortunate case like Adolf Hitler. It could be in a case where you have somebody that inspires you and moves you forward like Nelson Mandela. And again, very simple distinction between the two. Same leadership qualities. Same ability to harness a nation behind a cause. One was focused on fear and egocentrism. One was focused on ethno and world-centrism. Right? That's the only difference. Same skill set. So, how do you reconcile that? Well, I mean, let's take a model, because one of the biggest challenges I've seen with many people is trying to resolve the paradox between the spirituality, religious sort of metaphysical philosophy and the hard science sort of Newtonian, calculus-based philosophy. And again, you have to get comfortable with understanding the role certainty and uncertainty plays. Dan Pena has absolute certainty. One of my favorite quotes from Dan, and I heard him say this 25 years ago. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. You got to respect that. Total certainty. Why? Because most people are sitting on the fence dilly-dallying, wondering which side of the coin to flip, and therefore nothing gets done. No, I'm going to march this way, and guess what? If I get down there and it's a swamp, I'm going to march back and go down the other way. Yeah. But at least I'm marching. And that's kind of Dan's philosophy. Get off your ass and get busy. But the uncertainty principle is he's handled. There's no doubt there at all. Whereas if you take the metaphysics side, then that was thrown out after centuries of the religion and church being the main truth provider for society. Along comes, initially, Galileo, Copernicus first, then Galileo, and then we had Newton. Newton put calculus together, which means, hey, guess what? We can now figure out stuff as to why these planets move, and we can predict it. Therefore, we don't need this God deal to try and make up the fact that it's some guy in the sky with all lots of power that we don't understand. So science throws out the invisible because they now don't need it, and the spirituality kept that, but disregarded the visible because you still need creation. And no one's been able to reconcile it. So if you go to a scientist, a typical traditional Newtonian-based scientist that still thinks under the old paradigm of materialism that this is solid, then they will say, well, the reason meditation doesn't work and the reason that positive thinking is non-scientific and woo-woo and all of this new agey stuff is that it can't be repeatable. Doesn't happen every time. You can't put Koch's postulates to it. You say, well, hang on a minute. Quantum physics deals with the very, very small and the very fast. Traditional Newtonian physics deals with the very big and the very slow. So you take a roulette table and you blow it up to the size of a football pitch and you spin it half the speed that you can walk, and you hold a football-sized ball and you're waiting for 25 red to come around, and you hold it just over the top, and when it comes around you drop it. That's going to go in 25 red every single time. You can predict that. There's very, very little uncertainty. But the more you speed it up and the more you make it small, and you're still trying to watch that 25 and drop it, you're going to now increase level of uncertainty and probability. So when you're dealing with metaphysics, which is what meditation and a lot of the different inner world aspects deal with, very small to very fast. Yes, I can meditate on positive outcomes, but it doesn't always happen. Why? The wheel's spinning faster. You still set your intention. You can still influence it because you're still trying to drop it in the right place, but it's not going to happen as often. So traditional science says that doesn't work. That's woo-woo. And they know how to reconcile that when it's simply a sense of scale. So living with improbability and uncertainty is an inherent part of life. And as long as you can stack the deck in your favor by coming from love instead of fear, you will always be the house, not the player in the casino. It doesn't mean you're going to guarantee winning every time. It doesn't work that way. But you can certainly win over time more often than not if you come from that place. And I think that's what life's trying to tell us.
I love your metaphors. We were re-listening to some of your London Real episodes and other things in preparation, and it's just quite a recurring theme that you'll explain something with a metaphor. And I'm just curious as to how, was that something that you've always done ever since you were little, like kind of trying to explain the world in terms of other things, or did you stumble upon that as a good strategy for teaching others because someone taught you? How did that come about?
I don't think I've ever been asked that. And I never consciously made it a choice. For me, it was a way to explain it to myself. And then I found, I guess, others will usually follow on. I can explain it a little easier on feedback if you explain it. That's how the brain's designed. Yeah, and to probably give you another metaphor. It's designed to notice similarities and differences. But if you're learning something, it'll always try to label it against something you already know. And so metaphors are a natural way of being able to learn. So stories and metaphors, I think, are inherent to our DNA. If you go back, several thousand years, what is not consistent? Well, language, reading and writing. Only till 100 years ago, that was the privilege of the elites, the politically gifted, or you're part of the lucky sperm gang. So reading and writing, we've never been able to do that. So how has knowledge traditionally been passed down en masse? It's always been through stories, always been through word of mouth, and stories have been the way. And how do stories get told? Through lessons, metaphors, fables. That's how the lessons are put on. So I think it's inherent. And you see, on the religious side, I don't normally touch too deeply on religion on a lot of the podcasts I do because it's a very emotive subject for those that calibrate it through more fear than love. As you progress more up into the corridor of love, you tend to throw the rule book around spirituality away. The rule book ring, whichever religion you subscribe to, that tells you how to love or pay the consequences. But if you go to something like that, somebody familiar with the Judeo-Christian faith that permeates most of the Western world, and you go to the Bible, and you go to the book of Genesis, the Adam and Eve story. Now, most people growing up in today's millennial-focused world are going to take a look at that and say, dude, you got to be kidding me. You want me to believe in all of this, post 400 years of Newtonian physics, that you've got some Jewish guy that was his own father, that was essentially came back from the dead like a zombie, that if you decide to telepathically surrender to him, symbolically eat his flesh, that you'll be removed from get a curse removed from your body that was put there because a talking snake talked somebody, a woman who was made by a rib, into eating a magical tree. It's most millennials can't relate to that. So therefore, the sad part is they throw out the whole message, like science throwing out metaphysics when it decided it could figure out how the moon was going to move. Whereas, well, no, go back, human history. Lessons were told in stories. Stories were told in metaphors and parables. What is it actually saying? Because if you understand it and strip away the fixated fanaticism of thinking that that's going to be believable, which it isn't, right? And the only reason people do believe that, the only reason people believe anything in terms of religion is one reason. They were told to. That's it.
Yeah.
So what's the story? The story is very simple. Right? Two trees, tree of life, tree of knowledge. The tree of life says that you have everything within. It's life. The tree of knowledge is you don't have it within, you have to go outside of yourself to put it in. Right? Beautiful metaphor. Fantastic story. One of the most powerful messages you could ever give somebody. But when you get caught up in arguing and debating over whether the snake was talking or whether the woman was made out of a rib, you lose the message. So metaphors, I think, are inherently part of the human experience.
Definitely. But I think you're quite good at them. And it seems to be what a lot of people resonate with and why they're able to sort of learn quickly with you. That's something when I went to your Millionaire Business School, I thank you for inviting me the other time, by the way. It was a truly eye-opening experience, not only because I learned a few new things, which I hadn't learned before. A lot of the material I'd come across by learning the hard way myself. But the best part about it was the collective experience that I had with everybody else in the room, because a lot of them were newbies. And I saw them go through like 5-6 years worth of my learning in the space of 3 days. You structured it in such a way, and you talked and hit the right points at the right time. It's like sort of an allegory for everything that you might have to experience in life, and translate almost like a concert, I guess. Like if you hear Vivaldi's Four Seasons, it all happens in the space of a few minutes, but he takes you over that emotional journey. And you seem to have been able to do that to people. That really hit me, just how quickly they went through those life lessons.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's great feedback.
One question I have about that is, do you find that type of quick learning sticks as well as if they had to learn it in 5 or 6 years? Or does someone that learn it in 3 days need more reminding than if they'd spent a whole lifetime acquiring that knowledge?
Obviously, it's dependent upon several things. Learning isn't so much about repetition because, again, the biggest lessons of history is we don't learn the lessons of history. It's around shifting your awareness. You can't unlearn something that hits you in the heart. You can ignore it. You can debate it if you've got a trade-off secondary gain pattern that was preventing you from seeing it in the first place. But most of that is lack of awareness. So being able to raise people's levels of awareness and peel back the onion in a way where you get to the core. I see a lot of people get involved in learning and need reminding because they're too busy dealing with the surface issues. It's like trying to go to the chiropractor because everything's out of alignment. They make one adjustment and everything lines up. So the kind of teaching that I do at my events is all about that one adjustment, because then everything else makes sense. Otherwise you're debating details.
Yeah.
And then you get overwhelmed in the details, and overwhelm will lead to confusion, which leads to inaction, which means nothing changes. So I don't want to do that. Let's make some profound shifts so that then everything becomes effortless after that. And you tell me. I mean, there's you went through the event, and
there's some really, really powerful takeaways, and I've shared some of them in my own kind of helping of others since, and they've been really, really useful. I mean, John can attest for the usefulness and powerfulness of a couple of things. In particular, I think you found very helpful the card exercise that helps you look at your own past and parents.
Well, I mean, it was very helpful and devastating at the at the same time, where I guess one of the big takeaways from that is that when you rearrange your answers, it's revealed that when certain emotional needs that you have had since you were a child are not being met, you often react in the way that you've seen your parents react in times of stress and difficulty. And that kind of thing, I think most people don't want to realize that they're repeating the habits of their parents. And yet those are the first examples that we learn from as how you deal with things, how a human deals with a stressful situation. It's difficult. It's very revealing, and it's very interesting to have spent some time with my parents recently, and to sort of, it's made me, tell you what, it's made me perhaps very late to the game come to see my parents more as just two people rather than my parents, and that's who they are in the world. They're defined by being my parents and the adults that I look to when I need all sorts of support, from emotional to practical. And this is kind of strange, but it makes it drains the emotional tension in many ways. Like, it's no longer, how can they do this? Why should they do this? I'm like, well, because people do that, don't they? And they're just people muddling their way through the world like everybody else. So yeah, I'm still digesting, I think, the card exercise.
So it's a great exercise. I owe that one to a very good friend of mine, Sachin Raja, who runs a company called Warrior Sage, would you believe, in Vancouver. And great friend, great spiritual teacher. And he shared that with me one time when we were in Peru together.
Did he run it on you?
Yeah. and very powerful. I immediately saw the benefit on that and asked his permission to be able to use it in the events that I do, and he was gracious enough to be able to hand that, because he's all about, again, trying to contribute and help more people. And so that was that is one of the most profound parts of the first day. It's a phenomenal exercise.
It's one of the closing ones, right? We towards the end of the first day.
Towards the end of the first day, we do it as part of the journey to emotional maturity. Yeah. And I close out with that. But what always amazes me is the exercise we do in the room afterwards, where I always get somebody to connect with somebody else, and the gift that they give is always the gift that the other one's searching for. Yeah, it's all done without really words. It's all done through energy, and it's every sound that you can predict it every time. And I mean, you felt that there was more emotional release in that room at that point than you could ever get out of 6 months in therapy.
Yeah, it was just really, really powerful. I was really impressed by that. Magic moments were another really good one for me. Gratefulness and those kinds of things are quite useful, but that sort of took it a level further, that kind of journaling those moments, because I realized that a lot of people that have depressive tendencies or are negative, that I've sort of worked with or are part of my family in some way or friends, I realized that they're self-hypnotizing. Mm-hmm. They're constantly telling themselves bad stuff and going over the bad memories or bad emotions.
Of course.
And the idea of it's not like you can turn that off right away. So how about you replace it with the same idea, exactly the same thing, but a set of positive, really, really positive, powerful emotions. Yeah. And I immediately saw the value in that, and I started sort of writing mine down. I don't have you have quite a few, don't you? Like, how many do you have?
Over 1,000.
Okay. And you shared some of that day, and it was quite good. I told John that one as well.
Yeah, but the big one that really struck me and seemed to work for you is the wheel, like the balancing of the different elements of your life. Well, I was going to say, Dre, explain. Maybe you should explain. It's your model.
Well, it's part of a classic model that a lot of coaches use, whereby you break down the different segments like a pie chart of the different areas of your life, whether it's sort of family or spirituality or finance or health or what have you, and you sort of measure how you're doing on each one. And a lot of coaches use it because it shows balance on life, and I tend to use it for a slightly deeper reason. A couple of things. One is that where your strengths are, where your high numbers are on that sort of 0 to 10 scale, is what would be your natural go-to. Now, your go-to, whether it's business or whether it's family or whether it's something, what part do you score highest on as a tendency? And it'll usually be the same no matter what part of the last 10 years you look at. But your go-to is really revealing, because it's the opposite of that, which is what you're trying to avoid. Okay, well, I'm really lousy at money, but I'm great with people. Or I'm really good at business, but my kid's on drugs. Because I don't know how to be a father. What is it, the area that you're avoiding, and why? Because once we understand the patterns behind that, we can start making shifts. It's not just say, oh look, I really should spend more time in the gym because my health score is low. I mean, that's a basic life coach approach to balance, and life isn't balanced. Life is all about fits and starts. Life isn't this marathon; it's a series of short sprints. Let's get on with the project. I'm going to work 20 hours this week extra on here, and then I'm going to take 2 days off. You're not just going to do the same sort of pace for 26.2 miles as a marathoner. So, understanding that balance aspect is important, but it's really a window into what are the fundamental patterns that are driving me, and where do I need to look under the carpet that I've been sweeping stuff for a while, and ask some questions there that I haven't usually wanted to answer or usually want to avoid.
And that was so true of that exercise, but at the same time, you when you got us to draw it, you kind of paused after we'd finished, and you said something that really stuck with me, that sort of hits upon the whole balance thing, which was, now if this was a wheel for your car, how smooth would your ride be?
Yeah.
And I was just looking at my wheel going, oh my God.
Yeah, quick fit.
Yeah, and that, once again, is a really, really good metaphor, because, when people think of life balance of just between work and, I don't know, and entertaining yourself and kind of that seesaw, it's a silly thing, because you want to achieve something, you work really hard, and then you can take some time off. Like you said, you have to balance those things. But if that wheel that you've created from multiple things, spiritual, family, and all those other things, is too mismatched, then you can see how that would just make everything impossible. Like, it's one thing to be a little bit more or a little bit less on any of them. One can only strive to have that as a perfect wheel. It's not going to happen. But to have it with one close to 0 and 1 to 10 is just going to be, you're not going to be able to move on.
And there's certain games or certain parts of life that are non-negotiable. There are certain games that you're playing in life that if you're not consciously playing them on your terms, by default they're playing you. For example, the health game. You don't get to choose whether you play the health game or not. You're either playing it or it's playing you. Yeah, if you don't make time for health, you have to make time for illness. That's just a binary equation. The relationship game. You can't be in this modern society of interconnectedness and not be consciously playing the relationship game and looking to get better at that. Money. Money's another one. Like it or not, in modern society, it's a universal tool, arbitrary medium of exchange used to measure perceived value, but we still need to play it intelligently or it's going to play us.
Yeah.
Now, there's certain other games, some people don't want to play the spiritual game. Some people are quite happy not doing that, at least not at this point in their life. Yeah, that may change, or it may change next lifetime. But it's whether they do, whether they don't, that's down to them. But they can choose to opt in of that one or choose to opt out of it. But relationships, health, money, I've got news for you. Yeah, that's those three games you need to take charge of, or you're going to end up, on the back end of a poor dice roll.
Yeah. In the book that we use as a starting point for our podcast, The 48 Laws of Power, and some of the other conversations we've had, deals a lot with that. Okay, there's all these things that you'd like the world to be like, but this is what it is. So how are you going to deal with that? So knowing that 90% of the world operates from fear, how do you navigate that? And other questions like that. And I'm quite curious, because I don't think I've asked you this before. How do you handle when people are operating from fear and they are either an important part of your life or they are an obstacle in your way to being able to achieve something greater that will help other people, and therefore it's not so easy to just dismiss it or move away from them because they're somewhat in the way or part of what you're doing. Like, how do you operate with some, not from fear based, but with the understanding that you can't be super abundance based with them because they'll just ignore it. It'll go right over their head. Do you have ways to sort of handle them or help them or achieve what you want to do in spite of their resistance?
It's obviously very context specific.
Yeah.
And personally, what's coming up for me quite clearly is the fact that I don't have any right as to how I should impose my model of the world on somebody else. My one and only role is to show up as the best me that I can be. And in that particular circumstance, that may be no longer being the example for them in their life and moving on, to stay true to my truth. It may be that I offer them an invitation to a better way of thinking, but I've got no right to change them. I've got no right to cast judgment on them. I've got no right to suddenly start criticizing them or complaining. If anything, I would always look to myself as to what is the lesson here? What is the presentation principle at work? What is inconsistent with who I am? What part of them is a disowned part of me that I'm not accepting because it's riling me up the wrong way? Because it's always about you in terms of your journey and your lesson to be a better version of you so that you can light the path for others. That's the job of a lighthouse. A lighthouse is to make sure its light shining. You have no control over the ships. They can choose to take that as an invitation to steer away, or they can choose to ignore it and crash on the rocks, to throw in another metaphor. But your job is to be a lighthouse, and that's where I see myself. I'm here to be the best example of me that I can be and learn my lessons, and also be the ship on the ocean looking at other lighthouses and choosing to take that as an invitation to learn if I can, or ignore it and crash on the rocks, and then pick myself up and see what I can learn from that. But when it comes to saying, oh, this person's in my way and this person just doesn't get it, I don't look at it as what it is that they're not doing. Because that's, again, it's a disowned part of me. I can certainly have compassion around what it is they're not doing because then I see it as a limitation. I don't see it as judgment. I don't focus on the fact that, oh, this guy's just doesn't get it. He just wants to recklessly spend every penny that he gets, and no matter how many times I sit down and try and teach him basic principles of cash flow management or wealth building, he's not going to get it. The guy's no, you don't focus on the fact that he's spendthrift, because then it's his fault. If you focus on the fact that he is just financially unintelligent right now, then that's a limitation, just like a 3-year-old is. You don't expect them to go start understanding the basics of wealth management. So you see it as a limitation, therefore you can have compassion. It may not be on their journey right now, and as long as I'm not being the warning, I'm being the example, then that's all I can be. Whether it's for my kids, whether it's for my spouse, one has to come from one's own truth.
I guess the other side of that is also not to want to say, I told you so, afterwards.
Is that love or fear?
Do you think is it, well, it's definitely not love, but why is it fear?
Because it's ego-based,
Mm-hmm.
right? I told you so implies a validation that I need to be right
Okay.
in order to make you wrong so that I can feel better about myself. And the only thing that can get offended in that situation is the ego, which is always based in fear.
Yeah. I guess the fear is that you could have been wrong, or that you might be wrong, and so it's not maybe directly fear, but it comes from a place of fear.
It's still a toe in the corridor, and no matter what comes after what step comes after that, you're already in the corridor.
Is there something else that, from what you were just saying, maybe you can help me untangle? I was talking to a friend about this the other day. This idea that when we react badly to something we see in others, a behavior, a tendency, often we can understand it by saying, that's some part of me that I don't like.
Correct. Disowned part.
A disowned part. But it's left me wondering, what about behaviors in other people which I don't like simply because they're really mean to other people, because they're really selfish, because they're extremely, I mean, selfish isn't a good example because we can all be selfish, but if they're someone who goes around being something more extreme, which I don't think is a part of me that I'm in denial about so much as this person is really maxing out on some very nasty tendencies. Mm-hmm. Is that still some part of me that I'm disowning, or something else?
In my experience, if that's a situation, if it's riling you up, then there is a part of you that is saying, okay, what part of me am I not comfortable with being abusive? Because the reality is this: there isn't one word in the English dictionary that describes a human behavior, emotional trait that you've not been at some point, that I've not been at some point, that you've not been at some point. Right? Whether it's loving, kind, and empathetic, or arrogant, selfish asshole. Right? We've been everything. So how can you, on a journey to completeness, on a journey to wholeness, ever try to be whole while denying half of yourself? If I can say, something, I'm sure there's a part of me that comes up that can be abusive as well. And as long as you then give the access to empathy, it doesn't mean to say you condone it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean to say that you agree with it. Doesn't mean to say that you should violate your boundaries around it at all. But if it gets you, see, if I'm working with people in mental health issues and they start throwing things around, then I don't say, I can't believe that person did that. No, that's who they are, that's where they're at the time. Right? I have more compassion, understanding, and empathy. It doesn't mean to say I think it's right behavior. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean to say that I'm going to go do that myself. No. But I have a different energetic appreciation of the behavior. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But what if we went to an even darker place of child abuse, for example? How does that fit this model? You're
only talking about gradients.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what is that person doing and why are they doing it? Because if it's manifesting as, let's say, child abuse, the pattern that's driving that is the same pattern that could have probably manifest as suicide.
Okay, so when we're looking at the motivations behind, whilst not in any way going, well, I understand why you're doing it, we're going, I understand how you have had impulses that have led you to act in this way. And understanding, as we've talked about a number of times, understanding is not condoning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unless you can, and let's come to a level here. If you don't have the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, think their thoughts, make the same conclusions that they're making based upon their thoughts, beliefs, history, social conditioning, upbringing, and agree with what they say in that moment, you have absolutely no right to judge. Because you don't understand. Now, it doesn't make it's right. As I say, it doesn't mean you're condoning anything. But if someone sits there and says, I just don't understand how they could possibly do that to that child. Well, all you're admitting is the fact that you don't have the intelligence, the depth of understanding, or the wherewithal to appreciate why somebody did that. Yeah, it violates your model of the world. I'm certainly not here to defend it. But an understanding is a different level. Because you have to know that everybody does things for reasons. Now, they may not be your reasons, certainly may not be my reasons, may not be the reasons of anybody watching. But unless you can take time to understand those reasons, you have no right to criticize or judge. If somebody walks out and pulls a trigger on somebody, an innocent bystander, and then walks away, what the hell just happened? And then you find out in context that person's entire family were being held hostage, and that they were going to release a pathogen that was going to kill 5 million people unless they killed this person who happened to have a terminal disease anyway. And you start to shift the context. Now again, you're not making up stories to justify. You're saying is, let me find out the reason. It may be that they're just lonely, played too many games on the computer that were violent and decided to go try it out. But at least you're taking the time to understand before you then put a sweeping brushstroke to say, oh my God, I don't understand how somebody could possibly do that.
I guess there's no way forward after that either, because it's impossible, it's senseless, it's meaningless.
It's
then
positionality. That's it. Yeah. I've set it up that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm coming from righteousness, and therefore you're at the fulcrum and the tipping point of every single war that has ever besieged itself on humanity.
This is something I've encountered having to try to learn emotional empathy. So as an autistic person, I could understand it logically, but I didn't feel other people's emotions, and I had to go through a long life journey to get to the point where that was the truth for me. And when I got there, I realized that the people that had been telling me my whole life that I should be more empathetic and understand them better didn't understand other people because they were looking at everybody else as just another version of themselves. So they don't truly understand their emotions. They understand them because most people are roughly similar. If we live in a Western world, we've had similar upbringings, similar schooling. And so if someone punches you in the face, I know you'll feel pretty upset.
Yeah.
But they can't imagine beyond that. And so they say things like, I don't know why someone would do that. Or they tell you, you couldn't possibly imagine what childbirth is like. No, I can't feel it, but I can imagine it. I have that power of imagination. I can distance myself and look at the world from the outside, like you were doing with your memories. That is actually a really important skill for human beings if they want to be more aware. Because when we don't use it on ourselves, but we use it on others, and we can live in their mind for a little snap of a second, then we can understand them and feel their emotion and know what we expect their emotion to be. At least that's what I've encountered a lot. I've encountered that most people are empathetic to how they'd feel in that situation, not how
it's the only frame of reference they have, but at least it always starts with the intention.
Yeah,
I either intend to try to be empathetic and use the best experience I can, which is my own experience, and fill in the blanks or make up whatever I perceive would be your version of that, or I judge you and I don't give a crap. Or I'm too busy attacking your model of the world and defending mine in order to really understand what empathy means.
I can think about from the other side of moments during the day where if I've just let so much stuff pile up in my mind that I'm just ready to, I want to yell at someone, like I want to let out emotions, and I'm just like, no one better get in my way. And then, well, what would that seem like to them? They'd be like, what on earth is going on? This guy just suddenly went completely nuts at me. Why did that happen? And I think that we mostly go through life as the person going, I can't believe that happened. Why did that happen? Because, as you said, you don't appreciate, even if it's not okay or a good thing or justifiable, that person had a really awful day and acted very uncharacteristically. But instead we just want to go, people are awful.
Yeah. Again, egocentric, because it's violating your model of the world and interrupting your schedule or going against your values and morals. And there's very little understanding that there's 7.5 billion versions of that on the planet right now, and not one of them is going to be identical.
I'm really into the conversation when I keep talking, but I'm conscious about your plane trip. Are we doing okay for time?
We have 20 minutes.
What time's it now?
It is 20 to 4.
Got it. I need to leave at 4.
Okay.
Packed yet.
Well, let's do our little
minutes?
signature questions.
Yes.
Yeah, for 10 minutes. That's all good.
Cool. Is that cat gone?
Do you want to start it off?
Yeah. So one of the questions which I'm shamelessly taking from Tim Ferriss is, what is the book that you've most often gifted? And to add our own, what is the album you've most often gifted or recommended?
Wow. Book's easy. Mm-hmm. I'm more visual than auditory. Book would have to be context dependent upon who I'm actually looking to gift it to. There's the usual suspects. If it's down to finance, I'll gift The Richest Man in Babylon. I think it's an outstanding book for people who start to understand financial intelligence. If it's down to customer service, I've probably given away more copies of Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard to more people than I can count. If it's people that are really searching for a little more meaning in life, then Power versus Force by David Hawkins is something that I'm a huge fan of. Couldn't get my head around it first time round. Yeah, I wasn't ready. But if this kind of conversation is resonating with people at this level, then they're ready. Power versus Force is a must read for anybody that has any desire to understand different people at different levels of consciousness.
And song? Is there a song that you...
I don't think I've ever gifted an album. How sad is that?
That's all right. What about a song that it's your go-to song? If you want to feel a powerful emotion.
Titanium, David Guetta. That's I've got my mind movie to that song for the last 3-4 years. Different mind movie, same song.
Cool.
And is that sort of putting you in a positive place?
I'm anchored to it now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put it to like a multimedia vision board. Yeah, called a mind movie.
Okay, and that's upscaling from just putting the record on. Interesting.
Yeah.
Question I had, and I hope this works out. I figured it out today that I wanted to ask it, so I don't know if it's going to be good, but we'll see.
It'll be fine.
Is if you could choose anybody, whether alive right now that you know personally or someone historical or that you never met, to be kind of your right hand man, your hand of the king if you watch Game of Thrones, or vice president or whatever it is, like your go-to guy or girl, who would you pick for the next 2 or 3 years to help you with your life mission?
That's a very, very interesting question, because I automatically went to somebody that would be more better than me, as it were. You want to play tennis, play people that are better than you if you want to learn. And then you said sort of like sidekick or vice president, and then I had this pedestal thing kick in. Right. I couldn't put them beneath me. If I was to team up as a partner, then let's put it that way. I mean, Yoda would be a dream choice there for everything that he stands for. If it was a little more real, I think for the person I aspire to be, Nelson Mandela, without a shadow of a doubt. I think that would be a real honor to have and be in the presence of somebody that calibrates at such a high level of unconditional love and wisdom in the face of so much adversity, and have to be the example of forgiveness for a nation that was about to kill itself in civil war.
That's really cool. The other side of that question for me is, and if you could pick an advisor or partner or helper to guide you through the toughest time in your life, whatever that might be, whether it was a short time or a long time, like someone to go back and be your friend, sort of, or advisor, but if it was business, would it be a different person?
I would say that came up about the toughest times. You see, if you go for somebody like Dan, he'll just tell you to man up. And some people, that's what they need to hear. For me, it would probably be Mother Teresa, or Saint Teresa of Calcutta, as she now is. I was at the Vatican last Sunday with her.
Yeah, I saw the picture on Facebook.
But I would say at the toughest times, you can either get out through by me and try to wrestle your way through, or you can appreciate the deeper levels of the lesson, and rather than resist, turn it into a love-based step in the corridor than a fear-based step in the corridor. And I think she'd be probably the ideal example of how to do that.
Okay, cool.
I guess maybe it's the final one is, how would you describe being successful?
How would I describe being successful? I would probably say by transcending the limitations of self. Now, that's obviously a gradient, but so is success and so is wealth, and how many people benchmark success these days. I think that successful is the ability to walk your truth, regardless of what that is, independent of the good opinion of others, independent of whether you feel that you'll have approval or not, or whether you feel it will be socially accepted. To be able to say, no, I'm walking this path because it feels right. It doesn't make sense on paper. it doesn't win me the Academy Award of approval from my peer group. All right, maybe that's why it's time to change peer groups. But no, I feel that this is my truth with every ounce of my being. Kind of like if you go to the Matrix, and there's a point where Neo comes back from being rescued, and he says, "I've got to go back because they've captured Morpheus." And it's like, "You're not going back because he just risked his life to get you out." He says, "Yeah, but I can't explain it. I just know I can bring him back. I believe it." And there was a congruency there. He didn't care what other people thought. He didn't care against the odds. He didn't care. That, living your life from that place, to me, is success.
I guess unless you want to die for the purpose of being a martyr, because that poisons the kind of intention there.
The martyr pattern is different. A martyr pattern is being driven by fear because it's like, look at me, in spite of everything else. That's not truth. Now, if your truth is you happen to die in pursuit of what it is that you're doing, and people turn you into a martyr, then that's a different game. Gandhi didn't want to be a martyr. He became one as a figurehead of a cause because of however it ended. But he would have gladly gone down that path if it meant to free India.
So I guess the framework, the framing around what you said of pursuing the truth regardless of what other people may say, if it comes from a place of love, because otherwise very bad people pursue their truth as well, as we know.
Yes, I mean, and I don't believe Adolf Hitler's truth was to try to exterminate an entire class of people. I believe his ego was trying to justify itself and found a vehicle to be able to do it and got addicted to that feeling, and got hijacked from that perspective. But that's that's just speculation. But yes, I mean, if we go back to biology and say that the fundamental governing and overarching principle of life is to evolve to ever more levels of complexity, which inspires or requires contribution and cooperation, then that has to have its basis in love, not its basis in devolution and ultimately death through non-evolution, which is fear.
That's a good place to stop. Don't be Hitler, people. And
it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for inviting us to your home and speaking to us.
Absolute pleasure.
This has been Dre.
And this has been, and will continue to be, John. And Peter Sage, I guess, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I think the world needs more whispers in the dark.